I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, safe deposits? Following the collapse of two banks, the Treasury Secretary appears before lawmakers. We're on Capitol Hill. High stakes in Texas. New developments in the court case that could put a halt to around half of the abortions in the United States. Reaching an agreement. There's also an update on the group kicked out of a Smithsonian museum for wearing pro-life gear. And Academy Award. Learn more about a Catholic school dedicated to the famed author G.K. Chesterton. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us. Our top story tonight, the Biden administration brings its abortion expansion efforts to the heartland. Vice President Kamala Harris made a trip to Des Moines, Iowa today. This following her criticism of the U.S. Supreme Court, which she claims took a constitutional right away from women of America. The vice president referring to the end of Roe v. Wade, a victory for pro-lifers. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Tracy, it's the latest stop in a long line of cities Vice President Kamala Harris has traveled to over the last several months, demanding access to what the White House calls reproductive rights. However, pro-life groups continue speaking out and pushing back to protect unborn children and their mothers.
In Des Moines, Iowa, Vice President Kamala Harris issues yet another call for abortion access.
The government should not be telling her what to do with her own body.
The vice president going on the attack as well.
There are attorneys general around the country, including here, who are attempting to tell pharmacies to not dispense abortion medication.
Pro-life group National Right to Life says Vice President Harris supports no limits at all on abortion.
Her position is that there should be no legal protections for unborn children at any time during all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason.
While the Biden administration pushes hard for drugs like mifepristone to end pregnancies, Carol Tobias has this message of encouragement for pro-lifers.
This is going to be a long battle, but pro-life people are used to that. We've already been fighting for 50 years, so we're certainly not going to just give up and walk away now. Just keep up the fight. Those babies and their mothers need you.
Meanwhile, see it for yourself. The Pentagon releasing video of that incident over the Black Sea that brought down a U.S. surveillance drone. The Pentagon says a Russian fighter jet dumped fuel on the drone before the warplane clipped the drone's propeller in international airspace, leading to its crash. And in the White House press briefing room,
clearly, we do not seek armed conflicts with Russia. We maintain direct lines of communication for reasons like this to minimize risk of escalation.
Meanwhile, two U.S. allies, Japan and South Korea, holding a highly anticipated summit, agreeing to resume regular visits between their leaders and rebuild ties. The meeting comes as North Korea conducts more missile tests, likely intended to send a message about the summit.
The U.S. says it strongly condemns North Korea's missile test, calling it, quote, a flagrant violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions. Now back to the National Right to Life. They also told us today, quote, the Supreme Court last year with the Dobbs versus Jackson case did not take away any rights. They restored the ability for American people to protect the rights of unborn children. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, is the banking system safe? The U.S. Treasury Secretary says yes. However, several lawmakers are weighing in and sharing their disapproval of the Biden administration's plan to bail out failing financial institutions. Capitol Hill correspondent Erik Rosales joins us now with the latest. Erik.
Well, good evening, Tracy. You know, this Treasury Secretary did face the Senate Finance Committee today. Janet Yellen reiterated that despite the dramatic bank collapses of the past week, the American financial system is still in good shape.
I can reassure the members of the committee that our banking system is sound and that Americans can feel confident that their deposits will be there when they need them.
Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen laid out what emergency measures the administration has taken to shore up the banking system, telling senators all deposit accounts at both Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank in New York will be guaranteed.
Importantly, no taxpayer money is being used or put at risk with this action. Deposit protection is provided by the Deposit Insurance Fund, which is funded by fees on banks.
However, Republicans claim American taxpayers will pay for this.
All the banks in America that are going to have to pay for the president's bailout, they're just going to pass on those costs, including but not limited to their depositors. And last time I checked, most depositors in banks in America were taxpayers as well.
Republicans are concerned the U.S. government's action to help the California and New York banks appear to be a bailout. Minority Whip Senator John Thune says smaller local banks could be hit hard.
Capital wasn't really the issue with SVB. It was a liquidity issue. But I think there are people across the country who are watching this closely and are going to try to determine whether or not they're going to be on the hook for a lot of this mismanagement.
We have to ensure that we don't have contagion and that you do not have a run on these small community banks and regional banks, because that would obviously be disastrous for the economy.
So what's the answer? Majority Leader Senator Chuck Schumer says a thorough investigation is taking place, and then
we need strong legislation, and hopefully we can get something bipartisan done. That's what our goal is.
Several lawmakers' eyebrows were raised when the Treasury Secretary added that there are a few banks currently right now that the department is watching very closely regarding the stability of those banks. Well, both the House and Senate are planning to have even more hearings with executives and bank regulators in the near future. At the Capitol, Erik Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, a new White House task force aims to crack down on migrant child labor. This in the wake of a New York Times investigation that identified more than 100 migrant children, some as young as 12 years old, who say they were working overnight shifts and at dangerous jobs for U.S. companies. And joining us tonight in our studio with more on this is Alfonso Aguilar, political director for Americano Media. Alfonso, great to have you with us.
Happy to be with you.
So what more can you tell us about this?
Well, it's incredible they're creating a task force to deal with this when they've actually created this crisis. With their open border policies, they're encouraging this massive movements of people that facilitates child trafficking. Last year, we had a record number of unaccompanied minors arrive at the southern border, 130,000. Last year, over 3,800 minors were employed in over 800 corporations around the country. Sadly, it's child trafficking not only to put them to work, but also for the sex trade. So it's ironic because this administration said that they wanted to create a system that's more humane, more moral, but certainly this is not humane. We're encouraging this very dangerous trip to the border where these children are being taken advantage of, and they're being trafficked, many for sex trafficking. So what can be done is certainly we have to look at vetting, because a lot of these children are surrendering to the Border Patrol, but often because the Border Patrol is so overwhelmed, they release these kids, these children, to individuals who claim to be their relatives, but it turns out that they're traffickers. So that's very scary when our own government officials inadvertently are surrendering children, minors, as young as 12 or perhaps even younger to traffickers. The other thing I think that immigration agencies have to look at doing enforcement at labor sites, investigation and prosecution. This is the only way to deal with this. But at the very end, if we continue to ignore the border security, if we don't take concrete steps to strengthen border security, from a wall system to strengthening our border patrol with more numbers, using new technology, we're going to continue to have this situation. And as I've said, this massive movement of people truly facilitates this. And we know of 130,000 unaccompanied minors that arrived last year because they were detained by the Border Patrol. But how many actually entered without us knowing? This is a travesty. It's a humanitarian situation. The administration created it. I'm happy they're paying attention to it now, but the only way to put an end to this is to stop these policies that encourage people to migrate in such numbers to our southern border.
Yeah, House Republicans recently had a hearing down in Texas about the border. Do you think anything will come from this?
Well, I think Republicans are paying attention to it. Sadly, Democrats didn't show up to that hearing. So I am concerned that this administration is putting in place border policies that not even Democratic presidents in the past, Clinton or Obama, followed. They're liberalizing the asylum system so anybody can show up on the border, surrender to the Border Patrol, and ask for asylum, even though they may not have a legitimate claim for asylum. They're going to be processed and allowed into the country. That's the main reason we have so many people coming, because they know now that they can enter even without having to try to do it illegally. They just need to surrender to our Border Patrol. We've had, since this administration started, about 5 million people arrive at our southern border. You know, a good chunk of those people have already entered the U.S. So this is a very difficult situation, but unfortunately, this administration hasn't been doing anything to try to take operational control of the border.
We have less than a minute left, but I'm curious what else you're following right now.
Well, in Americano Media, we're paying a lot of attention to inflation. Inflation is hurting Hispanic communities disproportionately. They see an incredible increase in basic foodstuffs, bread, eggs, coffee at markets, but also the increase in prices of gas, of oil. So they want to have a broad conversation and try to understand how excessive government spending and also this war that the Biden administration is fighting against fossil fuels is actually leading to increased prices in oil and gas.
Yeah. We have to leave it right there, unfortunately. Alfonso, great to be with you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Poland pledges to send over about a dozen fighter jets to Ukraine. The move would make the Central European country the first NATO member to fulfill the urgent requests by President Volodymyr Zelensky. The planes are expected to be handed over within the next few days. France's government pushes through a pension reform bill amid protests. French President Emmanuel Macron used a special constitutional power to override Parliament. The bill aims to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64 and is the flagship legislation of President Macron's second term. The unpopular plan has prompted major strikes and protests across the country. And we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including lawsuit update, why lawmakers representing pro-life students are announcing a victory. And we speak to Live Action's Christina Bennett on the latest pro-abortion headlines across the nation. Well, the Diocese of Albany in New York has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Has been subject to hundreds of lawsuits alleging clergy sexual abuse. The move comes following negotiations between the upstate New York Diocese and lawyers representing plaintiffs in the abuse cases. Well, lawyers representing a group of pro-life students say they have reached an agreement with the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum.
This is an interesting situation because they pick on young people, students, who are just going about their day.
The South Carolina students who were in the nation's capital for the March for Life were allegedly harassed and kicked out of the museum for wearing pro-life hats. The agreement will now prevent any similar incident from happening in the future. The pro-life group's lawyers add that the case, quote, is far from over. The Republican governor of Utah has signed a measure to ban abortion businesses. Now, hospitals will be the only legal place to have an abortion. The proposal is set to take effect in May. Each year, around 2,800 women in Utah have an abortion. Well, it is the most common method of abortion in the United States, and its future is in the hands of a Texas judge tonight. At issue, the question of whether or not the FDA mishandled the initial approval process of the drug mifepristone back in the year 2000. Mifepristone blocks the hormone progesterone in the body and is used to end pregnancy within the first 10 weeks. Texas Judge Matthew Kaczmarek says that he will issue a ruling as soon as possible. And joining us tonight with more is Christina Bennett, correspondent for Live Action News. Christina, always great to have you with us. We are really talking about what could be a landmark case here. Walk us through what's at stake and also what's on your mind.
Absolutely. People are saying that this is the biggest abortion-related case since the Dobbs case and the overturning of Roe versus Wade. This federal judge from Texas has the power to halt sales of the abortion pill all across the country. And what's most interesting to me is that it applies to states that are pro-abortion, like my home state of Connecticut, California, and other states. I pray and hope that this judge will do the right thing and halt these abortion pill sales, because not only does the abortion pill take the life of an innocent growing baby, but it also hurts women as well. Many women have reported blood clots, abnormal bleeding, even fetal remains left inside of them because of the abortion pill. Over 20 women have died in association with the abortion pill. And so I pray that the judge does make the right decision in this case.
And you talked about some of the side effects and the dangers of this pill. Also talk about the emotional impact of this, you know, taking one of these pills and having an abortion at home, what that does to women.
Well, it's traumatizing. I know women who've had abortions who they can't even go by the clinic where they had the abortion because it's too traumatizing for them. All the memories come back to them, flood back to them. So imagine that instead of going to an abortion clinic and having an abortion, a woman is terminating the life of her unborn child, and this baby is coming into the toilet in her bathroom. That's going to change the way that she sees even her home, which is supposed to be a safe place, a place of peace and comfort, is now forever going to be a place where there was a death associated there. So that's really traumatizing for so many women.
Absolutely. I want to go back to the case in Texas now. I know there was a crowd of protesters, albeit a small one, outside the courthouse in Amarillo. Some of them were dressed as clowns. They say the judge is making the American court system into a circus. What's your take on this? And what do you think the reaction will be if the judge rules to ban mifepristone here in the United States?
Well, I think a lot of people do things for attention. You know, one day they're going to wear handmaiden costumes. The next day it's going to be clown costumes. But the reality is there's nothing funny about abortion. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the death and dismemberment of innocent growing children in the womb. And so whatever attention-seeking antics that people are doing, they're just trying to take away from the reality of a very sober situation. We are looking at millions and millions of children who lost their life because of this abortion pill, and it is dangerous for women and children. And so I think that those things are just merely distractions. Now, if this judge does rule in favor of the abortion pill sales being halted, of course, we are going to see uproar. We're going to see pro-abortion groups like Planned Parenthood and NARAL taking to the streets, marching, going on social media, and making a lot of noise. But at the same time, we're going to see millions of pro-lifers who are speaking out, speaking truth, going to social media and sharing their opinions and letting people know that this is a good decision. So we will see what we usually see, which is a divided country when it comes to abortion.
Christina, any final thoughts? We have about 30 seconds left.
I would just encourage people that are in Texas, of course, to, support the pro-life lawyers and organizations that are behind this case. And no matter what state you're in, even if you feel like your state is very pro-abortion, I would encourage you to connect with your local leaders, your local legislators, and let your voice be heard, because our voices are important and we can change the laws even in the most pro-abortion states.
Christina, thank you so much for coming on. Always appreciate it. Always great insights.
Oh, you're welcome. God bless.
God bless. Up next on EWTN News Nightly, the life and legacy of a Catholic author. How the work of G.K. Chesterton is impacting some Catholic schools in the United States. How the life and work of a beloved Catholic author is continuing in the classroom. The Chesterton Schools Network, named for G.K. Chesterton, began in 2013. It seeks to help Catholic schools establish a classical education model. The network is now part of the Society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton. And now, more than 100 of its students are currently on pilgrimage in Rome. Joining us now from Rome is Dale Ahlquist, president of the Society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton. Dale, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Can you tell us more about the Society of G.K. Chesterton and your Catholic schools?
Well, the society grew out of the American Chesterton Society started about 25 years ago, which was just to promote a wider interest in G.K. Chesterton, the great Catholic convert. It grew into a Catholic apostolate that is dedicated to evangelization through education. And we started the first Chesterton Academy about 15 years ago. 10 years ago, the second one started. In the last 10 years, there's been an explosion of interest in these secondary high schools, classical Catholic high schools, and there will be 60 schools open in the fall of 23.
Wow, that is so exciting. And I understand that your motto, Culture of Life, was inspired by St. John Paul II. Why did you choose that motto, and what role does St. John Paul II play in the work that you do?
Well, it certainly was a response to the saint's reference to that we are living in the culture of death, and we wanted to put the positive approach, which is the culture of life, cultura vitae. And it's really G.K. Chesterton who embodies the culture of life. It's his writing and his thinking of this wonder of life, this joy and gratitude, this thankfulness for existence. And that's why Chesterton is really the patron of the school. Chesterton says the whole object of liberty is life.
And you're talking to us. You're in Rome today, where you're on a pilgrimage with more than 100 students. Tell us about some of the maybe highlights of the trip and what the students were really looking forward to seeing.
Well, as a classical education model, this trip sort of is the culmination of their high school experience. They've been studying Catholic history and ancient history and philosophy and literature. And now they are here in Rome seeing all these things come to life that they've been studying for the last 4 years. And they represent 10 different schools from around the United States. And so it's a chance for the students to also meet each other, meet students from other Chesterton academies. And so we've been to the major basilicas, but also to some minor, beautiful churches. We've been worshiping together and praying together. And it's part of a Lenten pilgrimage. And really, our whole school is about formation. It's not just education, it's formation. And it really all comes together in this great highlight of being in the Eternal City.
It really is so exciting. Now, if some parents are watching right now and they want to learn more about the schools, how can they do so?
They should go to chestertonschoolsnetwork.org, and they can learn about our unique approach to classical Catholic education. It's a huge grassroots movement right now, and we're having amazing things being experienced out of these new schools. chestertonschoolsnetwork.org.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dale. Definitely needed in this day and age, and we appreciate you coming on. Dale Ahlquist, President of the Society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton. Thank you so much. And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sable. Good night, and God bless.